Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Carrie Temkin. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm the outreach coordinator in the Office of Student Financial Aid at UW-Madison. And more importantly, I'm a Badger alumna. I was a first-generation college student. I was a low-income first-generation college student. Went to UW-Madison. I graduated in 2009, so a while ago. But I remember how difficult it was navigating the financial aid process and navigating the college application process, right? So I'm just really grateful that you all are choosing to spend a part of your evening. I don't know where you're all coming from, but here in Madison, it is gorgeous. So thanks for taking a moment to hang out with me and learn about tuition and how to pay for it. I'm a pretty low-key presenter, non-formal, right? So if you have questions along the way, please just go ahead and pop those in the chat. I will answer them as I'm able, but we'll definitely have time at the end as well. So I'll get all of your questions answered. My hope is that by the end of today, by the end of this presentation, rather, you feel more equipped to enter into the financial aid process and know how to navigate it. So with that, I'm going to get started. Actually, there's one housekeeping item. So this is being recorded, and I will send out this recording and the PowerPoint slides to anyone who registered on the Visit Bucky portal. So you can expect that in your inbox sometime tomorrow or early next week. With that, I'm going to go ahead and start with a really important land acknowledgement. I personally am I'm at my home in Madison, Wisconsin right now. UW-Madison is in Madison, obviously. This presentation was created in Madison, so we are on Ho-Chunk land. The University of Wisconsin-Madison occupies ancestral Ho-Chunk land, a place their nation has called Dejob since time immemorial. And in the 1832 treaty, the Ho-Chunk were forced to cede this territory. Decades of ethnic cleansing followed when both the federal and state government repeatedly but unsuccessfully sought to forcibly remove the Ho-Chunk from Wisconsin. This history of colonization informs our shared future of collaboration and innovation. Today, UW-Madison respects the inherent sovereignty of the Ho-Chunk Nation, along with the 11 other First Nations of Wisconsin. If you are not on Ho-Chunk land, I invite you to explore whose ancestral land you are on and what that means for current day society. Now, I just have a quick question to the folks who are in the room. If you could just pop in the chat where you're coming from, if you're joining us from Wisconsin, Minnesota, or another non-resident, that would help guide some of my presentation, and I can tailor it a little bit more. So go ahead and just pop in the chat where you're joining us from. In the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and start with the scary stuff, the costs. This wall of numbers, I understand, is a lot to look at, but I'm going to break it down for you and go over some things here specifically. And I see that we have folks coming from all over the state. We have folks from Minnesota, from Illinois, from Michigan. That's great. Okay, so thank you for doing that. That's helpful for me because, first of all, you'll see that there's a difference in the cost of tuition if you're a Wisconsin resident, if you're a non-resident, if you're a Minnesota resident, and if you're a commuter. So first I want to break down that Wisconsin tuition, or tuition for Wisconsin residents, is subsidized by Wisconsin taxpayers. So that's why there's such a big difference between Wisconsin residents and non-residents. If you live in the state of Minnesota, you enjoy Minnesota reciprocity. That's the only state that Wisconsin has, UW-Madison has official reciprocity with. So you'll see that there is lower tuition for Minnesota residents. Just an FYI, if you do come here, you do officially have to register for reciprocity through the state of Minnesota. So have that on your radar. Commuter just means that you are living at home. So if you're like a Madison resident, for instance, and you live at home and your parent or family member are supporting you, that's the commuter tuition and fees. So you'll see that the tuition and fees is the same, but it's actually housing that's very different for commuters in terms of the estimated cost of attendance. Now, there's a few other things that I want to point out. On this wall of numbers, there's only two things that you will be directly billed for from the university. That's tuition and fees, and housing and meals if you live in the residence halls. Everything else that's listed on this slide are estimates based on your own experiences, based on what you're studying, and based on your spending habits. So for instance, required course materials and educational supplies, that's budgeted at $1,150. Anecdotally, I'm not hearing about a lot of students, particularly freshmen, spending that much per year on books. More professors are shifting to e-textbooks, which are cheaper. And a lot of students are renting their books, either from the bookstore, from Amazon, or they're borrowing used books as well. So that's one good way to save money. Another thing you'll see on this wall of numbers is personal expenses, $2,290. Again, this is not money that you're going to get a bill from the university for, but these are things that you have to think about. You have to be a human in order to be a student. So things like your cell phone bill, and who's paying for that, right? Clothing. How often are you eating off campus, going to the movies, right? You want a budget to have some fun and to be a human, but that's all based on your own personal spending habits. And again, you're not going to get a bill from the university for those things. Transportation is budgeted for our in-state students at $800, for our non-residents, $1,300, and $1,100 for Minnesota residents. Again, you're not going to get a bill for transportation from the university. This is just to help you budget, assuming that you're going to visit home a few times a year. So something to keep in mind is, let's see, let me look again at where folks are coming from. For people who are in Illinois, I don't think you're going to be spending $1,300 on the Van Gelder bus to get home a few times a year. So that's something to keep in mind. But if folks are joining us from like California, yeah, they might be spending that on transportation. Let's see, where else do we have folks joining us from? We have somebody from Portage, Wisconsin, so not too far away. I don't think you're going to be spending $800 a year to visit home a couple times a year. Now, a question that we get asked a lot is, oh, is that like transportation in terms of a car payment or having a car on campus? No, that's just assuming transportation costs to visit home a few times a year. We highly recommend that students do not have a car on campus. All right. So before I move on, any questions with the costs? This is for the 2022 to 2023 academic year. And the costs are set by the Board of Regents every single year. So it's not, tuition isn't a locked in rate for 4 years. All right, so that's the scary stuff. Those are the costs. So then we transition into financial aid, because financial aid is the good stuff that can apply against those costs. So the first thing that we need to talk about for financial aid is the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid. This is your entry point into accessing financial aid. So I'm going to throw out another question to the group and you can just pop it in the chat. What year in school are you? Are you joining us as a rising senior? When I say rising, it means like we're in the summer, right? So you haven't started school yet. So if you're going to be a senior in the fall, let me know. If you're going to be a rising junior, let me know. Like just so I get a sense of how old you all are. All right, so a lot of seniors. A junior here. Good. Okay, this is all super relevant then. Great. So the FAFSA is your entry point into accessing financial aid. It is free to fill out. I'm going to dive a little bit more deeply into more description about this, but I just want to make it crystal clear from the get-go that even if parents are unable or unwilling to support their student in college financially, we still need parental information on the FAFSA. So the vast majority of traditional age college students do need both student information and parental information when they're filling out the FAFSA. Now, your senior year in high school, you'll likely be applying to more than one school. I know I'm a little biased, right? UW-Madison is amazing, but you're likely applying to more than one school. However, when you fill out the FAFSA your senior year, you only have to fill out the FAFSA one time. It's not like you're filling out multiple applications for each school. You just have to enter in different school codes into the FAFSA, and your FAFSA information will then electronically be sent to any of the schools that you enter school code for. The FAFSA is something that you need to complete every year, though. It's not just a one and done type of situation. The FAFSA is based on financial information every single year. You can find it at FAFSA.gov, or if you just Google FAFSA, it'll bring you to the right place. I want to name that it is different from the CSS profile. There are some private schools and a lot of like East Coast private schools that require you to have a CSS profile to identify your financial aid eligibility. We are not one of those schools. So at UW-Madison, you just have to fill out the FAFSA. The FAFSA does become available every year on October 1st. So for our seniors in the digital room, pull out your phone, go to October 1 on the calendar, put an event, fill out the FAFSA, pizza party, something like that, right? If you find yourself at a Halloween party and your FAFSA isn't filled out, you've got your priorities a little twisted there, right? Get that FAFSA filled out sooner rather than later. Every school has some sort of priority deadline. UW-Madison's is December 1st. So we definitely want to see you having that FAFSA filled out between October 1st and December 1st. But honestly, for equity reasons, we understand that there's a variety of reasons why some folks might not be able to get that done by December 1st. So we're not going to take away financial aid from you if you're not able to meet that deadline, but do your very best to get it done sooner rather than later. And there are a lot of scholarships too that do have rolling deadlines. And I'll talk more about scholarships in a bit here. What I'm talking about right now is need-based financial aid from the FAFSA. When you're filling out the FAFSA, you'll be filling it out as a snapshot in time. So when it's asking you for how much you have in your savings account, you would pull up your online banking account and you type in how much you have, right? The caveat to that is when it's asking for tax information, it's actually asking for prior tax year information. And that's so that you don't have to wait to fill out the FAFSA until you've already filled out your taxes. So to give a little bit of texture around that, and actually I see that a question has come into the chat. Priority deadline, is that the same for regular deadline too? So the deadline for the FAFSA is separate from any sort of deadlines for admission applications. So just plan on filling out the FAFSA between October 1st and December 1st, the year before you anticipate enrolling. So for our juniors in the digital room, you'll be starting college the fall of 2024. You'll fill out the FAFSA October of 2023, and it'll use 2020 tax information. For our seniors, you're starting college the fall of 2023, and you'll be using 2021 tax information. So what are some of the things that you need? I'm not going to dive too deeply into this because the likelihood of you remembering this between now and October 1st is pretty slim. But again, you can access the slides and the recording later on if you'd like. But generally, you do need student and parent financial information. The caveats to that are you don't need parental information if the student is over the age of 24, if they're married, if they're a graduate student, if they have a student that they provide more than 50% of the support for, if they have a child that they provide more than 50% of the support for, if they are an active military service member or a veteran, or if they were orphaned after the age of 13. You also don't need parental information in situations where it is unreasonable or unsafe to get that information. So in situations where a parent is incarcerated, for instance, or in circumstances of domestic violence and abuse, those are situations where you'd want to reach out to our office and we'll help you navigate that situation. And please let anyone that you might know who is in a circumstance like that, encourage them to reach out to the financial aid office. We're happy to help. In order to start the FAFSA and digitally sign it, both the student and the parent need to create their own FSA ID, Federal Student Aid ID. And this is basically the login credentials of anything FAFSA or financial aid, federal financial aid related. The student and the parent have to create your own. because it's tied to your social security number. So I'm going to get on a little soapbox real quick here. It's so important that students are a part of filling out the FAFSA and a part of this process in general for a few reasons. One, just overall financial literacy and financial wellness. This is a good practice at adulting, right? And just so you know, just as a heads up, the moment that students start classes in college, there's this iron wall that comes down that doesn't allow us to talk to parents. I mean, we can talk to you, but we can't give you student information. Student information is protected by FERPA laws. So it's similar to HIPAA, if you're familiar with HIPAA healthcare laws. We have FERPA, which protects student information in higher education. So even though half the information is the parents, if you call our office when the student's in school, we're not able to talk with you unless the student gives us permission. So it's a really good practice to have the student involved from the get-go. Another reason that it's important that the student be involved is because when you're filling out the FAFSA, anytime it says you or your, it's talking about the student. And we all have seen instances, and when I say we all, I'm talking about financial aid folks, right? We've seen instances where parents are the only ones who are filling it out. They're filling it out for their student, and they accidentally flip their information with student information. And that messes things up, right? By and large, we can fix most things on the FAFSA. But if you have a hiccup with your FSA ID and you switch social security numbers, that's a tricky one. So be very mindful that when you're creating the FSA ID, the student has their own, the parent has their own, okay? You do also need a social security number to fill out the FAFSA. Students do need to be US citizens to be eligible for federal financial aid, but parents do not. So if you're in a situation where a parent is not a citizen, or if they're undocumented, for instance, you can just enter in all zeros for the parental information. You'll also need your federal tax information and records of money earned. You'll need your bank statements and records of any investments and records of untaxed income. So some tips and tricks. Students, when you are creating your FSA ID, don't use your high school email address because your FSA ID is going to be with you all 4 years of college and even beyond if you go to graduate school, and you're not always going to have access to your high school email address. Same goes for parents. Parents, don't use your work email address because that can change too, right? I already mentioned this, but parents, if you don't have a social security number, you can enter in all zeros when it asks for it. Another question that we get asked a lot is, well, what if my parents are divorced? Who do I put on the FAFSA? Right now, and I say right now because the federal government is going through something called the FAFSA Simplification Act. So in the next 2 years, a lot with the FAFSA is going to change. So just a heads up, especially for our juniors and younger in the room. For our seniors, everything is current. But for younger folks, some things are going to change, including the divorced parent situation. So currently, if you are in a divorced household, you use the parent who you've lived with the most in the last 12 months. If custody is split exactly down the middle, 50-50, and you've lived with both parents equally, then you use whatever parent has provided the most financial support. It's looking at overall household information. So if the parent on the FAFSA has remarried, then you also have to include step-parent information on the FAFSA. But you don't have to include the other parent information. Let me know if you have questions about that. Next question. Again, I've said this multiple times, but I just really want to hammer this one in. If a student is paying for everything, do you still need parental information on the FAFSA? The answer to that is yes. I was in a situation where this was complicated for me as a student. My dad is a self-employed carpenter. My mom was unable to work. We knew that I was going to be responsible for all of college. My parents weren't involved in any of that. And my dad was so frustrated that I needed his tax information on the FAFSA. He just didn't get it. He's like, why do you need my stuff? I'm not paying for anything. This is, ridiculous. And I, as a 17-year-old, was not able to articulate to him that, well, it's federal regulation, right? Had I not been able to get that information, I wouldn't have been able to go to college, quite frankly. So if you're in a situation where your parents are confused about why they need to put their stuff on the FAFSA, reach out to us. Advisors are happy to have that conversation as well. Next up, as you're filling out the FAFSA, you will have the opportunity to use something called the IRS data retrieval tool. This basically gives the FAFSA permission to suck your information directly in from the IRS and spit it into the FAFSA. If you're able to use that, we highly recommend that you do. First of all, because it automatically fills stuff out for you, that means that there's less for you to fill out. So that means that there's less room for human error and it goes faster, super smooth. Another benefit of using the IRS data retrieval tool is that it lowers your chances of being selected for a process called verification. Less than about a quarter of all FAFSAs get selected for verification from the federal government. If you get selected, breathe, don't freak out. It just means that you have to provide extra documentation to show that what you put on the FAFSA is accurate. But if you use the IRS data retrieval tool, it significantly lowers your chances of being selected in the first place. So another good benefit of using that tool. Something to note, though, is that for security purposes, it is quite persnickety. You have to enter in your information exactly as the IRS knows you. So it's helpful if you have your W-2s next to you or your tax forms next to you, so that you can enter in your name exactly as the IRS knows you, your address exactly as it is listed on the IRS website or the IRS information. It could be as sensitive as putting in street, S-T-R-E-E-T versus street, S-T dot. So just be mindful of that. You also can't use it if you've ever been a victim of identity theft for obvious reasons, or if you're married but file separately, then you can't use the IRS data retrieval tool either. All right, so the FAFSA is a federal website that's being used by hundreds of thousands of families all right around the same time of year. So that means that sometimes it can be a little glitchy. Now, I'm not saying that to give FAFSA a bad rap. I just want to encourage you to take a deep breath if you see that something's not quite working, right? Don't smash your computer. If something's going around in circles or you're not able to move forward, save it. Come back the next day. The feds hear about those glitches and they're pretty fast at fixing them. And also plan ahead. Don't wait until the day before the priority deadline to fill out the FAFSA because there could be some tech issues that are just out of your control. When you're filling out the FAFSA, there are little question mark bubbles next to every entry point that give you more detail about where to find the information that it's asking. But if you have more questions about what's relevant for your situation, there is a live chat agent. You can find it in the Contact Us section, and they're open pretty late. I think they're open until 10 Eastern. So utilize that chat function. I've utilized it while helping students before, so that's pretty helpful. Next up, we are still in a pandemic, right? There have been financial implications, huge financial implications for many families in the last couple of years. So if your financial circumstances are different when you start college than what the FAFSA shows from 2 years previously, reach out to our office. We are happy to reassess based on your current financial circumstances. So if you have any of the bad stuff, right? If any of the bad stuff has happened, if there's a death in the family, immediate family, loss of income, divorce, things like that, reach out. But also good things too. Like if there's a marriage or an added family member, or if a parent is retiring, things like that, also good circumstances to reach out to our office. We'll never penalize you. We'll just see if there's any adjustments that we could make in your benefit. Another question we get asked a lot on the FAFSA is, how do you report 529 college savings plans? The most typical circumstance we see is that it is owned by the parent, and you report that as an investment for the parent. You don't have to to report disbursements on the FAFSA later on. But when you're filling it out initially, you have to put the 529 savings as parental investments. So let's say you're filling it out for one student, and maybe you have a couple other kids that also have 529 college savings plans. You have to include all of those investments when you're reporting that on the FAFSA, even though it's not just for that one child that you were filling out the FAFSA for. We also sometimes see a circumstance where the 529 is actually owned by like a grandparent, for instance, or someone else other than the parent. That is not reported as an investment anywhere on the FAFSA. But the next year, when you fill out the FAFSA, you have to report what is used from that 529 as untaxed income for the student. For our folks in Wisconsin, I want to give a shout out to College Goal Wisconsin. For folks from other states, there are other states that have this, so you can check to see if yours is one of them. College Goal Wisconsin is a nonprofit that hosts events all throughout the state and virtually, and they bring financial aid administrators, financial aid experts together to answer questions as you're filling out the FAFSA. So you can come with your parent, fill out the FAFSA, and you get entered for a scholarship drawing as well. So if you have questions along the way, there's an expert there to answer them, and you get a chance at a scholarship. So it's pretty sweet. College Goal Wisconsin, check it out. All right, so after you file the FAFSA, you'll get a receipt. It's called the Student Aid Report. And this Student Aid Report will give you some really important information. The first, it will tell you what your expected family contribution is. I'm going to talk more about this in a minute, but I also want to myth bust for a second here. Before I was in financial aid, if I heard expected family contribution, what I would think is, oh, that's what I have to pay to go to school. And I would have thought wrong. It's a complete misnomer. The expected family contribution, that's the whole reason why you fill out the FAFSA, is to identify the expected family contribution. But it's not what you have to pay to go to school. Rather, it's an index number that the federal government uses to compare financial strength of families across the nation, and every institution uses that number differently. In fact, it's so much of a misnomer that the federal government is going to change what it's called in a couple of years. So it will be called Student Aid Index for the folks who are a little younger on the call. When you get your student aid report, you'll also learn about your basic eligibility for federal financial aid. So you'll learn if you are eligible for the Pell Grant, for instance. And this is the point at which you'll know if you were selected for verification, that process that I referenced earlier. Now, verification is a federal process, like it's identified by the federal government, but it is a process that you have to go through at every institution that you apply to individually. So keep good track of your records and who, like which institutions you've given information to. The results of the FAFSA are electronically sent to all the schools that you enter school codes for. There is a maximum number that you can enter though, and it's 10. So if you apply to more than 10 schools, choose your top 10, enter that in the FAFSA initially, and then later on, maybe you didn't get into all of them. You can go back in, delete some, and add new ones, and those new school codes can be entered, and then the schools will get sent your FAFSA information later on. You can expect to receive a financial aid offer after you're accepted to the university. Don't expect a financial aid offer before you've been accepted. And after you receive your financial aid offer is when you can reach out to the university with any special circumstances that I referenced earlier, like if there's any of the bad stuff or the good stuff that happened, for us to reassess your financial aid. Now, even though you have to wait until you're admitted or accepted to get your financial aid offer, you can use something called the net price calculator to identify a close estimate of what your financial aid will look like. The net price calculator can be found on the financial aid website. And after you fill out the FAFSA, you'll have all the information that you need to input information on the net price calculator, because it will ask you for things like your family adjusted gross income, your expected family contribution. That's the thing that the FAFSA spits out, right? It'll ask you if you're a transfer student or an incoming student, all those things, to spit out a pretty close estimate. So I highly recommend you use that. All right, so the FAFSA, why do we even bother with it? What does it do? This is how I like to think about it. It's this machine that lives in the cloud and sucks in all of your information and spits out that golden number, the expected family contribution. But again, remember, that's something that will change in a couple of years here. And again, the expected family contribution is not what you have to pay to go to school. It's a measure of family's financial strength, okay? Basically, it boils down to the lower your income, the more your expenses, the greater your financial need is. And based on your expected family contribution, you might get access to financial aid, like grants, scholarships, loans, and I will transition into that real quickly here in a moment. Some things I want to make clear is that the FAFSA does look at every single thing that you input into it as part of the calculation, but some things are weighed more heavily, and that includes student income and parent income and assets belonging to the student and parent. Now, when I say assets, do not report retirement investments on the FAFSA. Do not report entire retirement investments. Expenses, it's looking at the number of people living in your household and the number of family members, excluding parents, who are in college. This is another thing that's going to change in a couple of years. So heads up about that. We don't know exactly how things are going to be changing. We know it's going to change. So I like to give folks a heads up, knowing that it is this way right now, but it'll change in a couple of years. So that brings us to, well, what is financial aid then? There's all different types of financial aid, but I'm going to start with the good stuff, the grants and the scholarships. And I think this is what folks generally think of when they think of financial aid, because this is the free money. This is the money that does not have to be paid back. This free money can come from a variety of sources: federal government, state government, institutions like UW-Madison, and private sources. So when I say private sources, that's perhaps like a local community foundation, or maybe your parent's employer has a scholarship opportunity, things like that. So first I'm going to talk about scholarships. It's really important to note that anything on your financial aid offer at UW-Madison is solely financial need based. Merit-based information, for the most part, is not included on your financial aid offer. And that's something that's different at UW-Madison than a lot of other schools. So if you only remember one thing of this presentation, remember this: you have to apply for merit-based scholarships separately than your financial aid offer. And you can do that by filling out an application in the Wish Scholarship Hub. It's super important that you don't wait until you're accepted to apply for scholarships. You have to apply for scholarships after you apply to the university. And the reason for that is if you wait until you're accepted, then there's some deadlines that have already passed and you've missed the boat on scholarships for your freshman year. So you'll apply to the university, you'll get your login credentials, you'll be able to apply for scholarships after that. And the sooner the better. Now for scholarships, I want to name that your senior year in high school is a busy one. You're likely taking the most high academic rigor courses. You might be involved in sports, in student organizations. Maybe you have a job, maybe you have family commitments. All of that on top of applying to all these universities, right? That takes a lot of time. Well, scholarships on top of that takes even more time. And I've sat on several different scholarship review committees, and I promise you there is such a big difference between the students who throw together an essay the night before it's due versus the students who actually take their time to do a first draft, second draft, third draft, have other people read their essays. The difference in quality is huge. Also, it's really apparent when people copy and paste their essays from a different question or a different, scholarship application. Don't copy and paste. Like, obviously you can use what's relevant, but if it's not relevant, don't use it. Anyway, I'll get back to it. So all of that to say, it takes a lot of intentionality and a lot of time when you're filling out these scholarships to be a competitive applicant, and you have to make time for that. So be sure to look ahead and make time for that. If you're looking for scholarships, just like on Google, for instance, don't get scammed. Unfortunately, there are a lot of search sites, scholarship search sites, that are just trying to take your money. If you're being asked for credit card information or your social security number up front, don't mess with that. Here are some national trusted search sites, so you can take a peek at some of those. Now I'm going to transition into some of our financial aid specific programs that we're really proud of. So the first is Bucky's Tuition Promise. This is our commitment to Wisconsin residents who are either freshmen or transferring in, who have a family adjusted gross income of $60,000 or less. If you fall under this category, we promise to cover your tuition and fees for 4 years if you're a freshman, or 2 years if you're a transfer student. There isn't any additional application. It's all just based on your information from your FAFSA, and it'll automatically be in your financial aid offer. Even better than that, we have Bucky's Tuition Promise Plus. This is for our Wisconsin residents who are Pell Grant eligible. So I mentioned earlier that when you get your student aid report after you fill out the FAFSA, you'll see if you're eligible for the Pell Grant. If you are, and you're a Wisconsin resident, we will cover your full financial need for 2 years if you're a transfer student, or 4 years if you're a freshman. Now, financial need is jargon. Again, like if I were asked before I started at financial aid, what's my financial need? I would say, well, anything I need to go to school. That's not quite how it works. So your financial need is the total cost of attendance. So if you think back to my very first slide, it was that number down at the bottom, including tuition and fees, housing and meals, transportation, personal expenses, everything. So the sticker price, the cost of attendance minus whatever your expected family contribution is. That's your financial need. And that's what we'll cover with grants, scholarships, and federal work study. Again, no additional application, all just part of your financial aid offer. Badger Promise is our commitment to transfer students who are coming from a 2-year Wisconsin school or a select list of liberal arts associate degree programs who are first generation college student. First generation college students, according to the Wisconsin system definition, is any student who doesn't have a parent with a 4-year degree from the United States. And that I want to be very specific about that, because even if you have a parent with a 2-year degree, but not a 4-year degree, you're still first gen. Even if you have a parent with a 4-year degree, but from a different country, you're still first gen. So if you are a first generation college student, you should be talking about that in your college application essays. And there's a question on the FAFSA about it as well. If you are a Wisconsin resident and a first gen student and you're transferring, you will get free tuition and fees for 1 year. Or if you're Pell Grant eligible, we'll give it to you for 2. And then our last program for our Wisconsin residents is Fast Track. This is a program for our public assistance recipients, including free and reduced lunch. So if you go to a school where everyone gets free and reduced lunch, you're in this program as well. Or if you have a parent on Medicaid, for instance, you'd be in this program, which again covers your full financial need for 4 years if you are a freshman, or 2 years if you're a transfer student. For our non-resident students, for this current year, we offer our Pell Grant eligible non-resident students a $10,000 grant, plus whatever federal financial aid you're eligible for. And for this program and others, you can supplement with outside scholarships. Now, something that I want to name is that people who get outside scholarships, like private scholarships, automatically, I shouldn't say automatically think, a lot of students who get outside scholarships think that all their scholarships will just stack on top of what they're already getting from the university, and that's not always the case. So if you get an outside scholarship, it might displace some of your internal financial aid. So if you have questions about that, Give our office a call once you get your financial aid offer, and we'll let you know how any scholarship would impact your financial aid offer. All right, I got a question in the chat here. Somebody's dad did his undergrad from a different country, but grad school in the United States. So not first gen, right? If they have a graduate degree from the United States, then you would not be first generation. Good question though. All right, so I just talked about all the good stuff, the loan or the grants and the scholarships. That is money that does not have to be paid back. But there's other stuff that could be included in your financial aid offer and other things that are utilized to help make your dreams of a college degree become a reality. And those include loans and employment. So loans, we know that they have to be repaid, and they have to be repaid with interest. And employment, hey, you can get a job. You can earn a paycheck, can help you out. So I'm going to start with loans. There are all different types of loans, federal, Parent Plus, and private. Again, they have to be repaid, and they have to be repaid with interest. I see a question that came in the chat, so I'll go ahead and answer that real quick. Should I still apply to FAFSA if I'm not sure I'm going to need it? I love that you asked that. Yes, you should still apply for the FAFSA. If you think that your family makes too much money to get any sort of financial aid, like grants or scholarships, you should still fill out the FAFSA for a few reasons. One, how can you be absolutely sure, right? Especially if you're applying to other schools like private institutions, their threshold of being able to give financial aid might be a little different. So definitely fill that out. Two, there are some scholarships at UW-Madison that require you to have a FAFSA on file. So think about that. And three, the FAFSA at the very least, regardless of your financial circumstances, gives you access to low interest loans, which I'll be talking about here. Now, obviously, you only want to borrow what you need, but student loans are one way to build your credit as well. And I just want to name that, I'm going to get on another soapbox here. There's a national dialogue around the student debt crisis, and it's concerning, right? It's a real thing. It's something to think about and be concerned about. And a big part of that national dialogue that's missing often is that the vast majority of student debt that's held in the United States is actually held by professional students, doctors, lawyers, things like that, who had to take out a bunch of money in loans and then make a lot of money in their profession, and repaying those loans are part of their lifestyle. Now, obviously, that is not the case for everyone. There are fringe circumstances to that. It's actually the students who borrow less than $10,000 who then don't graduate who have the most trouble getting out of the student debt cycle. So, with costs of higher education, what they are, the reality for a lot of families is that they need to borrow to be able to go to school. If you are in a circumstance like that, okay, right? You can borrow. There's an opportunity to get loans. But if you take out a loan, you're also making a commitment to yourself to get to the finish line, to graduate. And that means taking advantage of every resource that's available on campus to help you succeed. Okay, I'll get off my soapbox real quick. Loans. All right, so I'm going to start with federal direct loans because these are the loans that you have access to just by filling out the FAFSA. They are under the student's name. There's two different types of loans, subsidized and unsubsidized. Of the two, subsidized are better because interest does not accrue while you're in school for the subsidized loan. Unsubsidized loans do accrue interest while you're in school, but both of these loans don't have to be paid back until 6 months after the student graduates. That's when repayment begins. Or if the student drops below part-time, 6 months after that. There's a cap. The federal government sets a cap to how much you can borrow each year of the federal direct loan. For freshmen, that's $5,500. That goes up to $6,500 for sophomores and $7,500 for juniors and seniors. The interest rate on that loan is set by the federal government every academic year. So for this current academic year, 2022 to 2023, I should say the upcoming year. The interest rate is 4.993% fixed. And then there is a small smidgen over 1% origination fee. That's the fee that the feds charge to lend, and they take it right off the top. So let's say you know that you need to borrow, and maybe you're an out-of-state student, and $5,500 isn't going to get you there, right? So what are some other options? You have two of them, a Parent Plus loan and a private loan. Now, we highly recommend taking advantage of those federal direct loans that I just talked about first before pursuing these other loans, because your federal direct loans are going to have the lowest interest rate and a lot of repayment safety net options. So for instance, I'll go back. If you've heard of the federal loan freeze, repayment on loans right now have been frozen until the end of August. Private loans haven't been frozen. So that's just something to think about. All right, so you have two options. One is a Parent Plus loan. This is a loan through the federal government. You can find the application at studentaid.gov. That's your one-stop shop for all things federal financial aid. This is a loan that is under the parent's name. It can never be transferred to the student's name. It is the parent's responsibility for repayment. The interest rate for next year is 7.543%. And the kicker with the Parent Plus loan is that there's an origination fee of 4.236%. That, again, is the fee that the feds charge to lend. So if you took out a $10,000 loan, the feds would keep about $424, but you still owe $10,000. Talk to your legislators. A second option is a private loan. This is a loan that a student would take out under their name from a bank or a credit union, but they need a cosigner. And the interest rate on that loan is based on their cosigner's credit. So a student pursuing a private loan would want a cosigner who has really excellent credit. It could be a parent. It doesn't have to be. We can't legally recommend one lender over another, but we do have a tool on our website called Fast Choice. So that is a online comparison tool that lists several different lenders that UW-Madison students have used in the past. So that might be a resource to check out. I'm going to pause there. Any questions about loans? All right. Moving on. Employment. Hey, you can get a job. You can get some money. Now, sometimes we get pushback, particularly from parents, saying, I don't want my student to have a job their freshman year. I want them to, take the time to get acclimated to campus. There's so many balls that they're juggling, right? Trying to figure out the new academic rigor, meeting new people, just figuring out the landscape. And I want to name that it is definitely a personal decision whether or not students have a job their freshman year on campus. And there's a ton of research out there that shows that students who have an on-campus job are more likely to graduate on time and do better academically than their peers who don't have a job on campus. And that's because, the number one reason is time management. This might be the first time in your entire life as a student where you could have a half day where there's no place you have to be. You might get super lucky and have an entire day where you don't have classes. And it is so easy to keep watching that next episode on Netflix or watching your TikToks or playing your video games, like whatever it is that you do, that you lose time doing, and not feel the sense of urgency of using the out of the classroom time to study. And that's a huge difference between high school and college. And so if you pop in a few hours here and there to work, it really helps with that time management. We see students having the most success working usually between 8 to 15 hours a week. Real quick, I do see a question that came in the chat. Should you be 18 to get a federal loan? You don't have to be 18 to get a federal loan. You have to be a student. All right, going back to employment. It also helps with community and belonging. You'll meet other folks that you wouldn't otherwise meet in your residence halls or your classes. So that's really helpful. And then, hey, you get you get paid. You get a paycheck. Maybe not $4 worth of paycheck. I'm thinking about like on Yelp where it has the dollar signs of how expensive restaurants are. But you get paid. We're seeing jobs usually between like 12 to 18 dollars per hour. They really range. The jobs across campus range. Federal work study might be part of your financial aid. Federal work study from the student perspective is no different than just getting any other job. You apply for a job on campus. Any job on campus is considered a work study job or a work study eligible job. You apply, you get accepted, you earn the wages of that particular job. You work how many hours you agree upon with your employer. You get paid every other week, and it's up to you how to use that paycheck. The wages from work study do not go directly to pay tuition. It's money you earn through a job over time. The benefit of work study is that the federal government pays for half of your wages, which means that you're a cheaper employee to the university. So at UW-Madison, that means that there are some departments on campus who can only hire federal work study students. So that's a benefit. Another benefit is that whatever wages you earn through your work study position aren't counted against you as wages on the FAFSA in the future. Now, if you aren't eligible for work study because it is a federal need-based program, don't worry, because we have over 1,000 jobs on campus. Here's just a screenshot from our student jobs website. It's just studentjobs.wisc.edu. And I recommend you take a peek at it this summer before you start school. There are even some jobs that let you move into the residence halls early. Housing does a really good job with that organized chaos, but if you can move in early, that is a perk. All right. So let's say you apply to UW-Madison. You get accepted, you celebrate, right? You get your financial aid offer. And I should back up. You apply to UW-Madison. You apply for scholarships at UW-Madison. You get accepted, you celebrate, you get your financial aid offer. Maybe you got some grants. Maybe you got a scholarship. Like that's on your financial aid offer. Maybe you're going to utilize those federal direct loans and you're using some savings, but let's say there's still a gap in your cost of attendance. What are some resources you can use to fill in that gap? Most of them I have already talked about. I just want to reiterate. The first, you could explore a Parent Plus or a private loan. Now, something I want to make crystal clear, when you are comparing your financial aid offers, it's really important that you are comparing apples to apples. UW-Madison very intentionally does not include a Parent Plus or private loan on the financial aid offer because those are things that you have to apply for separately. They have to be things that you are eligible for, right? There are some universities that include a Parent Plus loan as part of the overall financial aid offer. So be very mindful of that as you're comparing offers. Scholarships. Hey, scholarships are not something that you should just be looking for your senior year in high school. Scholarships are something that you should be pursuing your entire academic career. And even as freshmen, you should be looking ahead to see what scholarships are available for juniors and seniors so that you can start making decisions right away your freshman year of what student orgs should you be involved in? What leadership opportunities should you pursue? What's the academic expectations that are needed for scholarships so that you can be a really competitive applicant for those scholarships in the future? Employment, we just talked about that. You can get a job, get some money, help you pay for books, stuff like that. And then there are some other financing options. So the first is the Badger Pay installment plan. This is an installment plan that you can enroll in for $50 per semester. And instead of having half of your bill due in the fall and half of your bill due in the spring, you could enroll for one semester and have your bill split up into 3 separate payments. So hypothetically, you could enroll both for the fall and the spring, so a total of $100, and split up your payments into 6 payments throughout the academic year. The rest of the financing options that are listed on the slide are things that exist in the world that people have taken advantage of, but are just outside of the purview of a financial aid office to give any advice about. So if you have questions about home equity, life insurance policy, or pension plan loans, talk to a certified tax professional, talk to a financial planner. Or if you have questions about a 529 college savings plan, talk to the plan administrators or our bursar's office. They're the ones who handle payments. So keep that in mind. The bursar's office takes your money. We give you money, right? Be nice to us. I'm just playing. All right. So with that, if you are on social media, I highly recommend that you follow the financial aid office specifically on social, because we post about the random scholarships that nobody knows about. We post about events happening across campus and about different financial literacy tips as well. You can call our office. We actually do have summer hours right now, so 8:30 to 4. But generally speaking, during the academic year, you can call our office 8 to 4, Monday through Friday. You can visit us on campus. We're located at 333 East Campus Mall, which is, if you're familiar with campus, where the Walgreens is. There's a lot of, it's a big building there. And email us as well. So with that, I'm going to open it up for any remaining questions that you have left, and I'd be happy to answer them. Got about 3 minutes left, but I'll stick around as long as I need. Any burning questions out there? All right.
I've got a quick question.
Yeah, what's up?
We own a small sign shop. It's just two of us. So my husband and I are both self-employed. So I am trying to, I know on the CSS, which is not really something our daughter's pursuing, but I think there you have to include business income and assets, but I'm not clear on the FAFSA.
Yep. So the FAFSA will ask for like what is on your 1040s, for instance, of what would be your adjusted gross income based on your tax information. You do not have to report business assets if there are less than 100 full-time equivalent employees. So you wouldn't report those assets as investments or anything. You would just report what your income is. You're welcome. Business assets are one of those things that is changing in 2 years. So do be mindful of that and pay attention to that as you're filling out the FAFSA 2 years from now. All right, everyone, I'll stick around for a bit, but thank you again for joining me this evening. Good luck with your applications. If you have any questions, please reach out. I'll pop in my email address here. And a question came in, how do I pay for my financial aid? So I'm assuming that you're talking about loans, repaying your loans. You would do that through your loan servicer, but feel free to reach out and I can answer that specifically. Bye, everyone. On Wisconsin. Have a great night. Go enjoy this beautiful weather.